I died 3 years ago, but my husband wants to marry his first love. 3 years after my death, my husband was preparing to marry his terminally ill first love. He came to my house and asked my mother to sign the divorce papers. My mom told him I was already dead, but my husband impatiently retorted, "What nonsense is this? She's still playing these childish games. Olivia is dying. What's wrong with me wanting to be with her in her final days? Why is Emily being so selfish? Tell her if she doesn't come out, I'll cut off your medical expenses, old woman." He was trying to use me to force my mother to reveal my whereabouts. Little did he know, my mother had already given up on treatment long ago. She was holding on only to see my husband's regret. 3 years after my death, Jack finally remembered me. But now he was a celebrated business tycoon, while I was just a cursed spirit, unable to move on. He stood at my family's doorstep, scanning the empty room, and coldly said to my mother, "Tell Emily to get out here." My mother's frail body trembled as she replied numbly, "My daughter is dead." Hearing this, Jack sneered, "Dead? How could someone as selfish as Emily possibly die? I get it now. It's because Olivia is terminally ill and I want to be with her, so Emily's putting on this act." He laughed coldly and barged in, searching every room. But he couldn't find any trace of me. My mother said, "Emily really is dead. If you want to find her, go look in her grave." Jack's face darkened. "Think these tactics will work? Let me tell you, if your daughter doesn't come out and divorce me, don't blame me for cutting off your medical expenses, old woman." Seeing my mom remain silent, Jack laughed angrily and threw down the divorce papers. "Stubborn, aren't you? But it's useless. Make her sign within 3 days, then contact me immediately to finalize the divorce at the registry office." If you can't do that at this point, Jack's eyes showed a coldness I'd never seen before. "You might as well be dead." He slammed the door as he left, leaving my heart in pieces to divorce me. He would even threaten my mother's life. But in my mother's eyes, I saw a tenderness I'd never witnessed before. She calmly watched Jack leave, then turned and took out my childhood photos from a drawer. As she caressed my young face in the picture, I heard her whisper, "Emily, dear, Mommy will be with you soon." Naturally, I couldn't divorce Jack as expected. A few days later, he cut off all of my mother's medical expenses. My mom was elderly, with serious heart problems, along with high blood pressure, diabetes, and various other ailments. With continued treatment, there was still hope for improvement. But only I knew that 3 years ago, my mom had stopped using Jack's money entirely, and her illness had already progressed beyond hope. Mom had wanted to join me long ago, but she couldn't let go. She couldn't bear the thought of her daughter, who had given her whole heart, being abandoned and trampled upon. So until the moment Jack showed regret, she was determined to keep living in the A-week past, and my mom showed no signs of backing down. Jack finally lost his patience. He called my mom and sneered, "Your daughter is really heartless, isn't she? To avoid divorcing me, she's even using you in this ploy. I'm warning you, even if you die, I won't feel an ounce of sympathy. Tell Emily to sign the divorce papers." Obediently, my mother looked at my photo in her arms, her fingers digging into her palms. "Jack, I've already told you, my daughter is dead." Jack scoffed. "Looks like you're asking for trouble. You think your daughter can hide from my search? If she won't come out, I'll find her myself." A bitterness spread through my heart. "You want to find me, Jack? I really wish you could find me, but I hope you won't regret it when you do." Just then, a weak female voice came through the phone, accompanied by some coughing. "Jack, dear, is there any news about Emily? Is she angry? Does she want to wait for me to die?" Jack quickly put down the phone to comfort her. "Rest easy. Don't worry. I'll definitely divorce her and marry you. But..." Olivia shook her head, her voice choked with emotion. "I know Emily must feel wronged and probably resents me now. I understand. I'm not trying to steal you from her. I just want you to be with me in my final days." Her words were full of sincerity, but every sentence pointed the blame at me as if I were the homewrecker. And I knew that Jack would never take my side. "Olivia, how could you think that I love you? What right does Emily have to compete with you? Don't worry. Even if I have to search to the ends of the earth, I'll dig up her bones to sign the divorce papers." He seemed to deliberately raise his voice, making sure my mother could hear on the other end of the line, before hanging up abruptly. Listening to the dial tone, I could feel my mother's heart turning to ice. She struggled to her feet, wiping away a tear. With a smile, she said, "It's all right, daughter. Mommy will be with you soon." To find me, Jack mobilized all his connections in the city. I laughed bitterly to myself. This was probably the most attention I'd ever received from him. But it was useless. I watched as he turned the city upside down, even filing a missing persons report with the police, only to be told there was no record of me. Before I died, my mother had transferred my household registration to our hometown. I no longer had any official ties to the city. In his office, Jack flew into a rage. "Useless idiots. You can't even find one person. Have you all been eating dog food?" His secretary stood trembling nearby, finally mustering the courage to speak. "Mr. Zhao, we've looked everywhere possible. Ms. Emily is no longer in the city. Her mother is still here. Where else could she have gone? She couldn't survive without me and this city." Jack furiously swept everything off his desk. Watching his self-important display, I couldn't help but smirk. So he always saw me as a parasite in their family. No wonder he looked down on me and my mother. Perhaps we could check the hospitals. Ms. Emily was hospitalized after a car accident 3 years ago. There should still be records, the secretary suggested quietly. Jack's mind cleared for a moment, but he quickly realized something was off. Hospitalized? When was Emily in a car accident? Why don't I know about this? The secretary was about to continue when Jack's phone rang. Jack, my heart feels uncomfortable. I think I'm having a rejection episode. Can you come see me? Olivia's voice was urgent and helpless, and Jack's heart melted. He immediately dropped everything, sending the secretary to investigate my situation, and rushed to Olivia's side. My eyes stung with unshed tears. Once upon a time, Jack and I had shared such loving moments too. But now none of that belonged to me anymore. Perhaps these things were never meant to be mine, and I shouldn't have coveted them. In truth, Olivia had my heart. After 3 years in her body, it had likely adapted to its new host and wouldn't have any rejection episodes. She just didn't want Jack to be distracted by my affairs, taking away the love that belonged solely to her. Jack hurried to the hospital, and hearing from the doctor that Olivia was fine, he breathed a sigh of relief. Olivia's eyes lit up when she saw Jack. Jack, you're here. Seeing Olivia in good spirits, Jack realized she wasn't in any real danger. He had been irritable lately due to not being able to find me, and Olivia's constant demands were starting to grate on him. He couldn't help but feel a bit annoyed. Next time, if it's not serious, it's better to check with the doctor first. His tone was still restrained, but the displeasure was evident. Olivia was stunned for a moment, but quickly put on a tearful expression. Jack, I was just so bored in the hospital and missed you terribly. You've been so focused on finding Emily lately, you rarely come to see me. I don't have many years left to live. I just wanted to see you as much as possible while I'm still alive. This tactic always worked on Jack. He immediately felt guilty. I'm sorry for not considering your feelings. I've let you suffer alone in the hospital. It's all Emily's fault. Even at this point, she's still playing hide and seek. She's completely heartless. I smiled, right? I truly was heartless. My heart had been given to Olivia 3 years ago. Finally, Jack's secretary found my hospital records from 3 years ago. Emily Johnson, female, 27 years old, died from injuries sustained in a car accident. Despite resuscitation attempts, when he submitted this information to Jack, Jack's entire body began to shake. He flipped through the pages with bloodshot eyes, refusing to accept the reality. This is all nonsense. It must be fabricated by the hospital. Like a madman, he tore the documents to shreds. But the news of Emily's death in a car accident was already deeply etched in his mind. Impossible to erase. How could this happen? Why did I never know about her car accident? Jack tightly gripped his secretary's collar, shaking him violently. Why didn't anyone tell me? The secretary reluctantly informed him. Miss Emily was already on the brink of death when she was brought to the hospital. That day, you were busy preparing blood supplies for Ms. Olivia. The hospital called you several times, but you didn't answer any of them. The hospital said that due to a lack of suitable blood, Ms. Emily died from excessive blood loss. How could there be no suitable blood source? Doesn't the hospital have a huge blood bank? Did they feed it all to dogs? Jack shouted angrily. The secretary could only reveal the cruel truth to him. Ms. Emily and Ms. Olivia both have Rh-negative blood. You had taken all the Rh-negative blood from the hospital's blood bank, so there was no blood available for Ms. Emily. She could only wait for death. Jack's pupils constricted sharply. He painfully covered his ears and curled up on the ground. How could this happen? I didn't mean to take all the blood from the bank. I didn't know Emily had been in an accident that day. I didn't mean to take all the blood. I didn't. The secretary sighed. Mr. Zhao, what's done is done. Please try to accept it and grieve. He was about to help Jack up when Jack suddenly stood up as if remembering something. Out the office still pulsed with the echo of Jack's fury as his secretary's hesitant words reverberated in his ears. In that dim, cluttered space, papers strewn across his desk, the shredded remnants of hospital documents still clinging to his trembling hands, Jack stood paralyzed by a truth he could no longer deny. Emily was dead. 3 years had passed since I, Emily, had slipped quietly into oblivion, and now, even in death, my absence tore at the frayed seams of his carefully constructed world. But this was not my story alone. For years, I had existed as a silent observer, a cursed spirit bound to a life once shared, now reduced to the whisper of memories. I had watched as Jack, a man once so certain of our future, now wrestled with guilt, anger, and a desperate need to reclaim what he thought was his. And as his rage escalated, his voice rising with every recounted detail of the accident, every accusation of betrayal, I felt the bittersweet pull of both pity and resolve. From the other side of the veil, I had witnessed Jack's transformation with equal parts sorrow and irony. 3 years had passed since my body succumbed in that tragic car accident, yet in the cold corridors of memory and regret, I remained tethered to the life I once knew. I watched as Jack mobilized every resource in the city to search for a woman he believed was still alive, a ghost of the past that haunted him like a relentless specter. Now his anger had reached a fever pitch, and with each furious command he issued, I felt the weight of a love turned to bitter obsession. In the quiet of the afterlife, a realm of endless twilight and soft echoes, I could no longer remain a passive witness. I had become aware of Jack's machinations, his desperate attempts to force a divorce that would pave the way for his new love, Olivia. Yet, in his crusade to sever ties with a dead wife, he was unwittingly unraveling the tapestry of lies he had so long relied upon. My essence stirred, a silent vow forming in the void. If Jack was to chase after a love built on terminal illness and false hope, then perhaps he should face the full consequence of his actions. I drifted through the halls of memory, recalling the gentle laughter of a time when I believed in our love, when promises were exchanged under starlit skies. Now, those memories felt like shards of glass, beautiful yet dangerous. My mother's voice, warm and resigned, echoed in my mind. "Emily, dear, Mommy will be with you soon." It was a promise filled with both love and heartbreak, a promise that even in death, the ties of family were not so easily severed. Meanwhile, in the harsh reality of the living, Jack's fury turned his office into a battlefield of shattered documents and bitter accusations. His mind, reeling from the hospital report and the confirmation of my death, could not accept that the woman he had once claimed to love had long since passed away. His anger was a volatile mixture of grief and ego, the final blow, he seemed to think, against a betrayal that spanned both time and existence. I watched as Jack's secretary, Mr. Zhao, stuttered out explanations about the lack of Rh-negative blood and the chain of events that had led to my demise. His words were clipped and mechanical, but in each syllable lay a crushing inevitability. There was no blood available for Emily, no chance for her to survive that fateful day. The hospital records, though scorned by Jack, stood as an unyielding testament to the reality he desperately wished to rewrite. And yet, as Jack's grip on his own rage tightened, a part of him began to falter. There were moments when his eyes, red and wild, softened, flashbacks of happier times when my laughter filled the spaces between our conversations, when our hands were intertwined without the shadow of deceit. In those rare, vulnerable instants, it was as if he remembered the love we had once shared. But the present was unyielding, and the forces of bitterness and ambition demanded that he sever all ties with my memory. I could almost feel his internal conflict, a tumultuous struggle between the man I once loved and the cold, calculating tycoon he had become. His decision to force my mother's hand in signing divorce papers was not just an act of cruelty, it was an act of desperation, a final attempt to reclaim a future that was now slipping away. He threatened her with the loss of her medical expenses, as though controlling her finances could somehow mend the fractures in his own heart. As Jack's world teetered on the brink of irreversible change, I began to sense something stirring deep within the liminal space that separated the living from the dead. The custodians of fate, those unseen forces that governed the balance between love, loss, and destiny, whispered to me in the quiet corners of my afterlife. They reminded me that even a spirit, burdened by sorrow and the echoes of betrayal, could wield the power of truth. In the silent hours before dawn, as the city slumbered beneath a blanket of regret and unspoken truths, I resolved that my existence would no longer be a mere footnote in Jack's tumultuous life. I would reach out, not through spectral apparitions or haunting cries in the night, but through the subtle unraveling of the lies that bound him. If Jack sought to erase my memory, then he must confront the full weight of the truth, that some debts, once incurred, could never truly be repaid. I floated, weightless and unseen, through the familiar corridors of our past, a past where I had once believed in the sanctity of our love, where every whispered promise and every tender embrace had been real. I revisited the day of my accident, that cruel twist of fate that had separated me from the world of the living. I recalled the desperate attempts to save me, the futile rush of paramedics, and the final cold embrace of death. And in that moment, I understood that my story was not over. I was still here, not as a victim of circumstance, but as an agent of retribution, a spirit determined to force Jack to face the consequences of his actions. The night wore on, and the first light of dawn began to edge its way over the horizon. In the sterile light of a new day, Jack's fury had not subsided, but it had transformed. His outbursts had quieted into a simmering dread, a fear of what he could not control, the ghost of a love that once was, now turned into an inescapable reminder of his own failures. In that charged moment, as I hovered unseen by his tear-stained face, I whispered a silent promise into the dawn. Jack, if you seek to escape your past, you will find that some truths cling like shadows. I am here, and you cannot hide from what you once lost. In the silent hours before sunrise, as the city still slumbered beneath a gauze of mist, Jack's fury began to shift. The tempest of anger that had so recently consumed him was now intermingled with a growing sense of dread, a dread that whispered of inevitable consequences and ghosts that could not be exorcised by money or force. I lingered in that shadowed space between life and oblivion, watching him from a distance. His office, once a fortress of control and ambition, now bore the scars of his inner turmoil. Shredded documents, hastily scrawled memos, and a table strewn with the remnants of his rage told the story of a man unraveling before his own eyes. Jack paced the room with a haunted look. His thoughts must have churned like a dark sea. Memories of happier times, of laughter shared in quiet moments that now seemed like distant dreams. I recalled those moments with a bittersweet ache. Once I had been the light in his life, a promise of affection and companionship. Now I was but a lingering echo, a reminder of a past that he could neither reclaim nor erase. As he slumped into a leather chair, head in his hands, I sensed that the custodian's words from earlier were not just meant for me, they were a call to him as well. Somewhere within his pounding heart, the seeds of remorse and recognition began to sprout. Yet the path to redemption was as murky as the stormy night outside his window. Across the city, whispers of strange occurrences began to surface. Accounts of inexplicable chills, faint voices in empty corridors, and the eerie sensation that unseen eyes were watching. Those who had known Emily, who had felt the gentle warmth of her presence long ago, started speaking of a comforting glow in the dead of night. Unbeknownst to Jack, I was no longer content to be a passive observer. I began to stir. Not in a manner meant to terrify, but to force a confrontation with the man who had turned our once shared life into a labyrinth of bitterness and regret. I visited places that had once been our sanctuary. A favorite park bench under a sprawling oak, a quiet corner in the old family home, and there, in the soft caress of moonlight, I whispered reminders of what once was. In the gentle rustle of leaves and the muted hum of the night, I planted seeds of recollection in the hearts of those who still remembered our love. At the same time, I made my presence known in subtle ways to Jack. In the mirror of his office, when he caught a glimpse of a figure that vanished in an instant. In the faint scent of my favorite perfume that drifted through his study at midnight. In the sound of a whisper that murmured his name as he sat alone in the dark. I was there, not to torment him, but to force him to confront the inevitable truth, that no matter how far he ran, some debts of the heart were eternal. One rainy evening, as Jack drove home in his sleek car, a chill wind swept through the open window. In that moment, a familiar voice, soft yet laden with sorrow, echoed in his ear. Jack, you cannot hide from what you once cherished. He jerked the wheel, eyes wide with a terror he could neither explain nor dismiss. The voice was not his imagination. It was me, calling out from the depths of the past. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, his world froze. And then, as quickly as it came, the phantom whisper faded into the rhythm of the rain. The following day, in a rare moment of vulnerability, Jack returned to the hospital. Not to chase after records or bark orders at his secretary, but to confront the painful, undeniable evidence of my absence. With trembling hands, he revisited the files, each word a dagger that cut through the remnants of his self-importance. His eyes, red and glassy, scanned the documents over and over until the reality settled like a stone in his stomach. Emily was dead. That truth, though known for years, now hit him with renewed force. The relentless pursuit for a living Emily had been a desperate attempt to rewrite history, to deny the finality of my passing. But death, indifferent to wishes and regrets, was immutable. And in that stark clinical report, there was no room for the fantasy he had clung to. Haunted by the evidence and driven by a sudden, overwhelming need for closure, Jack began to seek answers beyond the cold pages of hospital records. Late at night, he ventured to the old cemetery where my grave lay hidden, a modest marker obscured by overgrown ivy. There, in the silence among the dead, he finally faced the undeniable truth. His hands shook as he reached out to trace the inscription on my tombstone. A name he had once uttered with love, now a cruel reminder of his own self-deception. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the silent stone. "I'm so sorry. For everything." In that moment, as tears welled in his eyes and the weight of his betrayal pressed down upon him, Jack began to understand that the road to redemption was paved not with power or money, but with acceptance and remorse. He had tried so desperately to force my memory into the present, to use my absence as a bargaining chip to secure his future with Olivia, a future built on terminal illness and the guise of new love. Yet now, in the face of the stark reality of my death, that facade crumbled. As the days turned to weeks, an unsettling transformation took root in Jack's life. He started to abandon his relentless, cold pursuit of a divorce from me, since there was no divorce to be had, and instead, he found himself trapped in an endless loop of grief and introspection. The anger that once defined him slowly gave way to regret, and with regret came a hollow understanding of what he had lost. I, as a silent observer, watched this transformation with a complex mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to revel in his suffering, to see him finally face the consequences of his choices. But a deeper part, the part that remembered the love we once shared, longed for reconciliation, a chance for him to atone for the betrayal, even if that atonement could never restore what was lost. Late one autumn evening, as Jack sat alone in his study, the glow of the setting sun filtering through stained glass, he finally picked up a pen. With hesitant strokes, he began to write, a letter addressed not to Olivia, not to his estranged mother, but to me. In his trembling script, he confessed his faults, his longing, and his remorse. Every word was a plea, a desperate bid to confront the ghost of the past and perhaps find a sliver of forgiveness. "I know I can never undo the pain I've caused," the letter read. "But if only I could speak to you one last time, to tell you that I remember the love we once shared, and that in my heart, you will always be a part of me." I felt the bittersweet sting of those words echo through the corridors of my existence. They were a reminder that even in death, the ties that bound us were not so easily severed. And as the custodians of fate had whispered in the darkness, some debts, those of the heart, were eternal. In the aftermath of that fateful autumn evening, Jack's study lay in solemn disarray. The letter he had written, each trembling word a confession of his lost love, a plea for absolution, rested on the desk like a fragile peace offering. By day, the office was quiet. But by night, Jack found himself haunted by memories of the past and the relentless presence of a ghost he could neither fully embrace nor escape. I, Emily, lingered between worlds. Though my body had long been claimed by death, my spirit had not been granted permission to fade without consequence. The custodians of fate had whispered to me in the darkness, urging me to let my presence be a reminder that some debts are eternal. And so I watched, as Jack wrestled with his guilt and regret, and as he slowly came to understand that no power or wealth could erase the truth that I was gone. One cold starlit night, driven by a mix of desperation and the desire for redemption, Jack made his way back to the cemetery where my grave lay hidden beneath tangled ivy and time-worn stone. With shaking hands, he traced the inscription of my name, a name once spoken in tenderness, now a bitter echo of his own mistakes. "Kiss me goodbye, Emily," he murmured to the silent marker, his voice cracking with remorse. I wish I could undo the cruelty of my choices. In that moment, a chill swept over him. I appeared, not as a malevolent specter, but as a quiet, sorrowful presence. My voice, soft as a memory, whispered through the night air. "Jack, you cannot hide from the past. Only by facing it can you begin to mend your broken heart." For a long, suspended heartbeat, time seemed to pause. Jack's eyes widened, and tears traced paths down his weathered cheeks. In that haunted cemetery, a choice was offered: to continue down a path of unyielding anger and denial, or to finally accept the full, painful truth of what was lost, and, perhaps, learn to forgive. Jack knelt at my grave, the letter trembling in his grasp. "I am sorry," he whispered, voice raw. "I have been selfish, trying to cling to a memory while pushing aside the truth of your absence." For the first time in years, his words were not laced with anger or despair, but with a tentative longing for redemption. The weight of his guilt began to lift as he realized that in his frantic chase to reclaim a love that was never truly his, he had only condemned himself to endless torment. At that moment, I felt something shift deep within me, a stirring of the old tenderness I once held, mingled with the quiet strength born of my spectral solitude. I had lingered so long in the shadows, not out of vengeance, but because I longed to be seen, to be remembered in truth. And now, as Jack's remorse filled the silent cemetery, I was offered a final choice: to let go of the bitterness or to haunt him forever. The days that followed became a fragile period of transformation. Jack, once the ruthless tycoon who had tried to force my memory into the present with threats and intimidation, now sought a different path, a journey inward to reconcile with the grief and guilt that had festered for years. At the hospital, his demands had long since ceased. Instead, he quietly visited his ailing mother, listened with remorseful silence to the echoes of her own long-held sorrows, and began to unravel the tangled web of his own making. Every time he recalled my name, it was no longer with cold disdain, but with a solemn promise to honor the truth. One chilly morning, as the first light crept over the horizon, Jack returned once more to the cemetery. With a pen and a new journal in hand, he began to write, words that were no longer pleas for a fantasy lost, but genuine attempts at understanding his own failures. In his journal, he recorded memories of our past, the tender moments of love and laughter, the gradual decay wrought by his selfish ambitions, and the bitter cost of his unrelenting pursuit of a future built on deception. As he wrote, I felt my presence soften. The custodians of fate had always warned that the debts of the heart could be repaid only through sincere atonement. And here was Jack, finally choosing to confront the ghosts he had long tried to bury. His journey of redemption was not instantaneous. It was filled with long nights of remorse, quiet apologies to those he had hurt, and a willingness to accept the irreversible loss of a love that could never return. Late that day, as Jack closed his journal and looked up to the sky, he seemed to whisper to the heavens, "Emily, I hope that wherever you are, you can forgive me." In that moment, a gentle breeze stirred through the cemetery, carrying with it the faint scent of jasmine, my favorite. It was as though the veil between our worlds had lifted just enough for me to feel that my words had reached him, that my silent promise of forgiveness had been granted. I felt a bittersweet peace settle over my spirit, a quiet acceptance that my own destiny was now entwined with Jack's journey toward atonement. And then, an unforeseen twist rippled through the fabric of our shared fate. A letter arrived at Jack's office, a final unexpected message from my mother. In careful, elegant handwriting, she revealed that long before I had died, she had accepted the inevitability of our separation. "Emily is at peace," the letter read, "and so must you be. True love does not cling to the living nor mourn the dead. Let her go, Jack, and let your own heart be free." Those words struck Jack with the force of a final judgment. For years, he had tried to cling to my memory, to manipulate the living world as if it could revive a love that belonged solely to the past. But now, as he read my mother's heartfelt message, a profound clarity emerged. His desperate need to force a divorce from the ghost of a wife was not an act of love, but an act of self-destruction. In the quiet that followed, Jack made a decision that would forever alter the course of his existence. He contacted the custodians, a secret council of those who guarded the delicate balance between love, loss, and redemption, and requested that my spirit be released from the burden of haunting his every step. The custodians, recognizing the sincerity in his plea, whispered words of release in the twilight between worlds. In one final act of transcendence, I felt my spirit begin to soften, the tether that had bound me to this life gradually loosening. As the days passed, Jack transformed. No longer driven by bitter revenge or an insatiable need to control the past, he began to rebuild a life rooted in humility and genuine remorse. He dedicated himself to helping others, those scarred by the harsh realities of deception and loss, using his vast resources to fund charities, support bereaved families, and promote truth in a world too often mired in lies. In a quiet ceremony, attended by only a few who understood the gravity of the moment, Jack laid a single white rose on my grave. It was a gesture of release, a final farewell not only to the ghost of a love lost, but also to the man he once was. And I, Emily, finally found peace. The spectral weight of years past lifted, and in its place a gentle warmth embraced me, a promise that even in death, love could evolve into compassion, and even the deepest wounds could one day heal. As the sun rose on a new day, a day unburdened by past transgressions, I drifted into the light, leaving behind the bitter chains of vengeance and regret. Jack's final act of forgiveness became the unexpected turning point in our tangled tale, a beacon of hope that even in the realm of the departed, redemption is possible. In that final transcendent moment, the story that began with betrayal, heartache, and spectral longing reached its unforeseen conclusion, not in despair, but in the quiet promise of renewal, a new dawn for both the living and the departed.